Hello everyone, today we have a very interesting video, and I know I say that about every single video, but I mean it this time because today it is International Women's Day and we have a special guest, Kajol Patel. So definitely, can you introduce yourself to my viewers?
Hey everyone, my name is Kajol and I am a consultant at Deloitte. I've spent nearly 4 years there and I spend my time doing a little bit of digital consulting as well as strategy consulting. And in my spare time, I also have a YouTube channel where I talk about consulting, entrepreneurship, and soon to be productivity as well.
If you guys are interested in consulting, definitely check her links down below. But today we have a pretty important topic actually in terms of women in the workplace. So because we're both consultants, it's going to be more geared towards consulting, and we're going to be going over consulting, perceptions, advancement, some sticky situations, and empowerment. In these particular areas, we're going to go over our experience and what we think you should be doing in these situations to really get out of sticky situations, and also our personal experiences or maybe stories that we've heard. So first off, we're going to be talking about consulting. Like, what exactly are our experiences as a woman in consulting, like in terms of anything under the sun when it comes to consulting? So I guess like I'll start off first and say that I definitely can tell that, like, especially from my own mom, she was like, number one, consulting, you're traveling all the time. So it's not the best for a woman to have a family. And at first I was like, you know, you could do both too. It's not necessarily sacrificing one or the other. You can have a career and have a family and your own personal life too, and health. So it's just something about that kind of deters people from consulting. And then even worse, like for technology, even then, like most men are in technology. So we need more women in technology and ultimately in technology consulting. So I'm kind of curious about Kajol's experience for this.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting because in the UK, what happens is that I think the firm that I work in, Deloitte, by the way, is really flexible. So I know women who have gone on maternity leave and they've put in constraints being like, I don't want to work anywhere outside of London, for instance. They, you know, directors, partners, they really take that into account, especially when you've built like a brand up and you spent like a considerable amount of years in the firm. I do think that when you do start out in consulting, especially much more in the junior grades, you are expected to travel. But, you know, as you get more senior, if you have actual reasons such as family, like you've mentioned, they're a little bit more chill, I would say. But in the UK, just to quickly sum it up for people, I think we are basically nearly 50% women, men in consulting, which is great. But the biggest thing I find is in terms of promotion, okay? For every 100 men that get promoted to manager level, only 73 women are, which shows such a big disparity against women reaching. So there actually is like a glass ceiling in place where women can't really like progress more in the UK anyway. I find that really interesting. I'm not sure how you've seen that. And I've definitely seen less and less female leadership compared to male leadership, I would say, in the UK.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number, but I do know, and I'm kind of curious about this in your perspective as well, like in terms of, do you think it's because they select mostly men or because of women having particular characteristics that's not ideal? So for example, like, oh, she is a mother, so that way we don't think that she should be in this role because you're gonna need to focus on your career so much. Kind of curious, like, what do you think is the reason why people actually feel either that they can't deliver to that particular point to get to that level, or they're just being discriminated when it comes to advancement?
Really interesting question. Now, I am going to say this, that I think back in the day, like 10 years ago, there definitely used to be discrimination, being like, okay, this woman is going to have children soon, or she's coming to the age where she's going to have children. We don't want her on a project just in case if, you know, the client gets angry that we let, you know, a woman go. Because I think there's something around like client relationships, but I think that's back in the day. I definitely do think it's changed now. So rather than actual reasons in terms of discriminating reasons, I think there are things that women do which kind of put us in the back compared to men. So like men are quite assertive, they're quite competitive, you know, they'll always boast about some of their achievements, I would say. Whereas women, we kind of just keep it to ourselves. We feel like we're boasting.
Yeah, I can completely agree. The reason why I asked that question is because, like, for example, salary negotiation, the question everyone asks, a lot of times for women, they don't feel like they should negotiate for their salary because they feel like what they have is enough. They feel like they don't have enough or confidence because of maybe how society really drills it into them. And what I've noticed too is that the same exact thing applies when it comes to advancement as well. If maybe when it comes to talking in a meeting, like, yes, the men should kind of take a step back and, you know, let the women speak too. But at the same time, I notice a lot of women, they don't speak up because they feel like they don't actually deserve a seat on the table. So it kind of goes both ways. And I know we're going to go into this a little bit later, but under perception, I think because of that, that's probably why people are falling into these little stereotypes or like little silos of how you're supposed to be rather than what you should be.
And talking about stereotypes, you've mentioned, something about women. I feel like I've heard this, that women can be like too much or too little. So like, for example, if we're assertive, we're too aggressive, right? Or if we're, not talking, then this person has no impact in the room, right? I'm quite interested in terms of tag of emotion and women being emotional, because I don't think that's true. I think, women, we actually take a step back, we think things through. And I think there's like a stat which shows that, female CEOs end up having much more, revenue generating companies as well, which shows that, women do not lead through emotion, I would say. So I'm quite curious your take on that.
So I think this is interesting because I'm an INTJ, if you guys know what that is. And I am actually, in terms of what it means to be T, the INTJ and the T, I'm 100% T. So by that definition, I have no empathy. But I mean, like, in all seriousness, I actually focus more on logic. I barely do anything out of emotions. I do have some kind of emotions. I do drive a lot of my decisions. But when it comes to driving business, driving client interactions, I think a lot of times I hate the fact that people think, yes, women are emotional, so therefore they're only set for that kind of like therapist role or marketing role instead of like something more technical, like for example, coding or consulting. So those are kind of the ones where they bring in their own aspects of themselves. But when it comes to something like that, I find it a little bit interesting because I purposely avoided those fields because I want to prove people wrong. I can do just as well as them. And like when I'm talking about them, I'm talking about men.
But I think it's fine to feel emotion, and I think it's fine to feel feeling, because I actually feel it gives you power to understand something, right? And to have empathy and understand the other side. But I think what potentially can go wrong is when you react to your emotion, because then you squander that power that you had, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree, because if you start to bring in your own emotions, and honestly, when it comes to men, they do it too. It's not just women that do it. So yeah, it's really just like depending on the situation, and it also depends on the person because not everyone is the same. And when it comes to dealing with situations, I do like a lot of people have their own power in terms of how they handle it. So when it comes to women, they may have like what they call it the woman's touch, which again does not apply. But then one thing I do notice is that the perception of this emotion. Let's say, for example, if a male project manager is saying like, you need to do this, give me this information, give me that. No one really thinks twice about that. When a woman does it, they think that she's bossy just because she's assertive, just because she needs it, which is what your role is supposed to be doing. I think it's a perception of society that just because she's emitting these strong emotions or emitting these strong assertiveness that like all of a sudden you're bossy. So that's just something that I've actually seen in the workplace that is kind of something subliminal, but it happens.
And talking about the workplace and what you've seen, do you consciously think about the teams that you work with, if they're, male fully, if they're female fully, or if they're a mix? Like, what do you prefer working with? Do you even have a preference?
I really like working with mixed. And when it comes to, like, for example, it comes to consulting, very male dominated, tech, even more male dominated, finance, super male dominated, all three. Like, I fell into that bucket. And every time it's always going to be just a little bit, there's always going to be fewer women, even though Accenture does have like a strong initiative for this, because most people are just not interested in that area as a woman at this particular point. But that's because we need to empower them to show them you can do it. Because I think a lot of times people are like, what do I know about finance? Like, all I know is like those investment banking bros. And that's why I don't want to be in those degrading situations as well. So that's kind of like what we need to go in that position. But I like those mixed perspectives because it's not necessarily always going to be the same in terms of the approach. Like, we actually do have our own ideas and how you approach it, like what kind of ideas we bring, our own backgrounds. So like that's like something that's really interesting. One thing I do want to mention is that like actually on a particular sales pursuit, our firm actually got shut down because the sales team particularly was all white male. There was like not a single woman. So the client noticed that and was like, nope, we're not going for you. So we're going to be going with the other team, which is more focused on like diversity. They had like people of color, they had men and women equal ratio in that particular sales team. So that's just something to notice. It's not necessarily the consulting teams, but that was like something that clients actually start to take notice.
I've definitely been seeing that as well. I've definitely seen that, clients more and more so do value, some of these more ethical and moral issues. So that might be the type of work you're doing. It might be the people on your team and how diverse they are as well, in terms of race, in terms of gender as well. So I think this is such a great initiative. And people always say that actually, trying to promote more women, we should just be giving people, based on merit. And I think that's such a wrong opinion, because these women, or people of color, for instance, they don't have the same opportunities that other people may have. So you understand the privilege that you may have, because everyone has merit. They just don't have the opportunity to develop it based on the environment around them.
Yeah, and that's actually something I'm noticing too in the interview process, is that they're not going based off of merit. They're going based off of potential. So they see that, like, for example, if you're going into technology consulting, you don't have the technical skill, they at least want to see you can develop it. So that's why it opens up a lot of pools in terms of, like, for example, apprenticeships. Like, we have it now for when it comes to like underprivileged communities where maybe they didn't even have access to school, like when it comes to like actual university. So that's something that a lot of firms are now doing to actually be able to open up to that pool, not just to women, but also of other people of color.
I love that. I think that's so important. And I'm so happy they are doing that, because I think potential is the biggest thing. It's not merit a lot of the time. Yeah. And in terms of like, I know I'm struggling with this one. So I always find that I have loyalty to my firm or the people around me. I'm not sure if you feel that, but I feel like a lot of females or women that I've worked with also do feel the same, where sometimes we put our job before our career, when really we should be putting our career before our job. And that's because, we create these ties of loyalty with the people we work around, and that in the end of the day, somehow, it limits us to be able to jump to another firm or to jump onto another opportunity or a team, because we're kind of like, oh, what will they say? How will they feel, right? I'm not sure if you feel the same.
I actually do feel the same. When it comes to Accenture, at least, I know everyone's saying like, oh, the way to grow, you need to jump from firm to firm, company to company, different jobs to get that financial boost. But personally, I want to stay where I feel welcomed. And that's actually something that probably a lot of firms are thinking about, because we have very high attrition rates because it's consulting. Everyone wants to jump around. But a lot of times you have like a very welcoming environment already. It is already going to be enticing a lot of people to stay. And for me, that's actually has been the case. So it has been helping in terms of retaining talent, which means you can retain your diversity instead of having them leave to other places. So I'm kind of curious in terms of advancement, because you've been at Deloitte for over 5+ years now at this point, and I'm curious because you probably have seen the firm grow. You have grown itself in consulting. So how have you seen like women rise up through the ranks? Have you noticed like something that they have done, or maybe that the firm has done to help this out, and maybe even your personal experience?
For sure. I've seen so many initiatives inside of Deloitte to allow females and women to rise up. So obviously there are small huddles of communities where there are women, and how we can increase women in leadership. So there are specific programs where they take people from like senior consultant level, I think, and they start training them up with leadership qualities and team qualities and things that we need to like know and think about to allow us to progress. Because some of these things, these biases which we mentioned around, we feel a little bit awkward to say no, we don't really build alliances, we minimize ourselves. It starts to tackle some of that stuff, but also much more of the corporate, how to rise up the ranks. So there's loads of initiatives and programs specifically targeted for women to do that. And I think there are specific ones also for women of color, I would say as well. I'm not too sure about that one. I would also say is that there's also training being given to everyone in terms of, diversity and inclusion, unconscious bias, especially with everything that's been happening over the last few years. We've all had to go through unconscious bias training, and that does include, working with your female colleagues and so forth, and understanding, when to bring them in, how to help develop them. And obviously as a coach, and as you go a little bit higher through the ranks, you need to learn how to coach people, and you need to know how to mentor people and guide people for the right decisions that they need to make. And sometimes as a coach or a mentor, it is your duty in a way to kind of push people out of their comfort zone, and where you see they can stretch themselves and kind of edge them and help them develop themselves. So there's loads of different initiatives, from coaching, from actual programs to help boost women. But I would say that Deloitte has definitely said that we want more women in leadership. So I have seen in the last few years definitely more women being promoted to director and partner. I wish I was like around that stage where I could kind of get that. But definitely been seeing them pushing it a little bit more. I don't think it's perfect yet. Definitely don't think so. I would love to see like 50% at least. I don't think it's nowhere near that yet. But we are trying to push it to a positive stance, I would say. How about at Accenture?
So actually, this is something I found interesting because like one of the main reasons why I even thought about Accenture in the first place was because of their woman 50-50 2025. So what that is that they want 50-50 in the workplace of women by 2025. And actually, like I'm looking at the numbers at this time, it's almost there. It's so close. And we only have we have 4 years left and we're almost there. So one thing I thought was interesting is like when I was actually recruited, it was a male CEO. Now we have a female CEO. And that actually changes a lot of things. It really gives a lot of women some hope that like, okay, they do care. They're actually doing it. They're not just gonna say it just to say like we have this initiative. They are delivering. And one of the things I noticed was like when I went through all my internships, they were not diverse at all, either through like more male focus, more female focus, not really diverse in terms of like ethnicities. And at Accenture, we are so diverse. I was so impressed. And when it came to something like that, it really shows they did deliver on what they're asking. And one thing that I did notice as well is that when I first did my orientation, actually, our New York metro area, like managing director that's focused on the region, she is a woman and she actually has 3 kids, went through masters, and the entire time she managed to have her career at Accenture. So she showed you can do it. And that was one thing that I really found like, wow, I can do it too then. I don't have to listen to my mom who was like, you can't do it. I would just listen to her because she did it. She is the living proof that she can do it.
And I think that's a really important point that you've made. It's about inspiring the next generation, which a lot of people don't realize. And I think that's like, it's something which I definitely, actually I chose Deloitte because one of the main reasons I chose Deloitte was because in the USA, it was the first Big Four company to have a woman CEO. And that was one of the biggest reasons I chose Deloitte. It shows that there is a commitment there to keep women, to push women in leadership. And also at the same time, I would say that, I think your hopes do reduce. So I think this is happening right now in my operating unit. There's not a lot of women in leadership, I would say. So a lot of us are feeling like, why? Why is there no like women? Can we not make it? So in terms of, as you said, in terms of ethos and just feeling like you can get to the top. I think that's something which, inspiration is a really big key. Also just to like our own mental health in terms of like feeling like we can do it and just keep motivated at the same time.
Yeah. And I feel like one of those things could also be like, for example, some sticky situations we've been in as well, where maybe like something we've done that we're just there existing. We're not even trying to do anything weird or anything. But then we still get some comments here and there, some perceptions of, for example, like your bossy kind of thing, or maybe that they're giving you something that they think a woman would do better, like for example, marketing or HR, and not really giving you the opportunity to even explore the other options. So like we mentioned before, you really want that community, and you also want to have that ethos as well to make sure you feel that you are empowered, you can do what they're doing as well. And I think like how that starts with is empowerment, and also making sure like quid pro quo that you're not actually going to be doing something that will have retaliation as well, or that any like circumstances that you don't want. And I think a lot of times like nowadays, workplace harassment training, a lot of unconscious bias, like Kajol was talking about, like a lot of these firms are now doing this, and actually it does help a little bit, because I found some of the trainings they do, like I actually didn't even notice, like even as a woman, that can be considered harassment, for example. So maybe it's just something ingrained into how we behave that like we accept it, but really learning about what is not accepted, what is accepted. It's always going to be a fine line because everyone's going to be learning, but it's really that community of empowerment, really having those conversations is really key. And one thing that I think is really key is really also talking and making this happen. And one of the things that we do want to talk about in terms of empowerment is make sure that you don't put other women down. You actually lift them up, you support them, because I'm like, actually, like here's some stories that I did hear myself, was that in a particular boardroom, there was like a woman that was leading the particular boardroom, and that's great and everything. However, she seemed to be favoring men more, and it's probably because of how it was in terms of how she was raised, and like, oh, we gotta respect the men kind of thing. But that's just something that we need to kind of be like actually conscious about, like what is happening, so that way you know you're not ignoring the woman, even though you're a woman yourself. Like, why are you ignoring them too? Because you know you're in the position of power. You need to show that you're going to empower them as well. So that's something I've noticed as a story that I've heard.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think, only developing people around you can you develop as well. If you push people down, it's also your brand which is getting tarnished at the same time. And I think what you mentioned as well in terms of we need to create a safe space where we can talk about all these things that women go through, and also make it okay to talk about periods and all these other things which women go to, because I feel like they're taboo in the workplace as well. I'm quite just like blatant about it. I'm just like, guys, I can't work today, I'm on my period, for instance. I'm just one of those people. But I feel like a lot of other women can't say it, and they don't feel like they can say it. We need to kind of talk about, to make it, to normalize it, right? Because it's not happening today. And in terms of sticky situations, right? Like this is going to happen always, I think. And I think that's really annoying. I don't know why, but I remember this isn't at Deloitte, but this was actually prior to another firm. It was like my first ever project away. So I've never been on a project away from, my home, and I was working with this guy, and this guy at 11 p.m. he knocked on my door, on my hotel door. Like, who knocks on your hotel door at 11 p.m. for nothing, right? So I just pretended I was sleeping and didn't answer it. You do have these sticky situations, and unless you talk about them, sometimes you should just report that, because it's not okay. And by letting it go sometimes means that it's okay. And I know we don't want to be the person to report something like that, but I really do feel if you don't report things like that, then you're saying it's okay for that to happen, and it's going to keep on happening for other people around you. If you show it's not okay, then other people will feel like they can't do it, right? So that's just another thing I would love to add.
Yeah, and actually I did find this a little bit interesting because, for example, if you are in that community where you empower each other, you feel like you can talk about that. Because at the end of the day, you're not just championing yourself, you're championing all of the other women around you. So let's say, for example, that door knocking situation, if you did not report it, then he's going to do that to all the other women too, and they're going to feel uncomfortable, and they're probably also not going to report it. So it kind of goes it's not just you, it's also everyone else, and we kind of need to also raise everyone out to make sure these conversations had to be had, and that there are actual circumstances that are also going to be happening.
Yes, woman power, stick together. I love that. No, and do you have any advice for someone who is in a sticky situation? What would you say to do?
Yeah, so I've actually been in a few sticky situations. Some of them are even because of unconscious bias or because of how they were raised and they didn't even know. Is that really just telling them straight up front? You don't have to feel like you're being confrontational because you are feeling uncomfortable. You just do it. Just say, by the way, I think that was out of line, and this is why. Because most of the time they don't actually know. They just think that that's just how life is supposed to be. So one of the things that I actually had happen was one of my colleagues told me, Christine, oh, your boyfriend's also in consulting? So I don't know how that would work out. And I'm like, why? Is it because I'm a woman and I should be the one staying home and not traveling? Because my boyfriend's not the one traveling. I'm actually the one traveling. So it's a little bit odd to him because he was always used to the one where the woman is the housewife and the man's the one doing the work or traveling or doing all these things. So I told him you need to stop thinking that way, because if you say it this way, it means that you were saying women should be staying at home. And I know he did not mean that. He was just probably used to that kind of environment. But saying that, he was just like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize. It just came right out, because he was actually half drunk at the time.
No, but still, you're right. And I think you're right for calling it out, because then you're also helping to educate people. And that definitely does have a more a network effect, right, where it ends up spreading, right? So I think that's a really, really important thing to do. But if you are in a really, really sticky situation, I would say just get yourself out of that situation first. And then, talk to someone about it. It could be a coach, or it could be someone else where you feel comfortable speaking to. But then, I do think that sometimes you need to give voice and report people like that, because, as I said, I think I've said this so many times today, but I'm really passionate about it. But don't normalize that behavior.
Yes. And I don't know about you, Kajol, but actually one of the main reasons why I even started YouTube is because I want to show people a woman can do this. A woman can do tech, a woman can be in consulting. That showing us as representation already is enough to empower you. And I'm so glad to hear all the people that have said yes, because of my family, they were probably like saying don't do tech or don't do something like you're focused on the arts, not do tech, or even don't even get a job, just get married and have kids kind of thing. Like they already told me like me being on YouTube already shows them that I can do it and they can do it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I get a few messages as well, actually, where people, you know, are like saying like it's really amazing to see a woman talking about all this stuff. It's really interesting to see. I'm really glad to see a woman of color also talking about this stuff. So, you know, I like there are people in the space, you just don't get to see them. But I think when you see people representing it, it makes it so much more powerful because it gives someone a, you know, a view that, you know, we can get there. And I think that's one of the biggest things that it helps to motivate people. So this is, you know, exactly like you said, this is one of the reasons I've tried to do this as well. And one of the reasons on my YouTube channel was to help and inspire women to thrive in male-dominated environments, be it consulting, be it banking, and so forth. So I hope we are doing that, Christine.
I definitely hope so too. But definitely, if you are interested in consulting and you want to support Kajol, definitely subscribe to her. Check her Instagram as well. So informative in terms of anything you need to know about consulting as well. So definitely check her out. And I don't think there's many women in consulting in the UK talking about anything like that, because like from even just talking, it's so different. So if you want to know the perspective of consulting in the UK, definitely check it out as well.
Thank you so much. That's really, really kind, and loved this video and I loved being on this channel with you. So, you know, I hope that we definitely do talk about more about women issues. So if there's anyone who's interested about a certain topic as well, definitely leave it in Christine's comments. So we'll definitely pick it up again.
All right, thank you guys so much. And also, happy International Women's Day. And hopefully you guys all learned so much from this video and also get these conversations going. So if there's any other women you want to empower today, definitely message them or call them or do anything like that and talk about these things. Because I think that's like the main message we want to say is like bring these conversations up so we can make a change.